24 teams, 12 from each conference. And the Buffalo Sabres still ain't sniffing the playoffs. Yet, Jason Botterill, despite the fact that the Sabres have had the worst and the second worst record in the NHL, the entire NHL respectively, beyond October, I think, over the last 2 years or so, they decided to retain this guy for a fourth season. It's maddening. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. I said this on this podcast last week when I did a segment with Joe before we did the draft this week. This week was about the all-time Sabres draft. Last week we had a topic talking about the more current-day Sabres, and I said it on last week's show, and now I really mean it. I really mean it. I hate the Buffalo Sabres right now. I hate them. I don't dislike them. I don't loathe them. I'm not disappointed in them. I'm not disenfranchised with the Buffalo Sabres. I freaking hate the Buffalo Sabres right now. I hate every single thing about this team on the ice, and especially, and I mean especially off the ice. This is a team, they can't get out of their own way when it comes to public relations. I'm not even going to rehash all the stupid shit that happened throughout the year. I'm talking from a PR standpoint. I'm not talking about on the ice. I'm talking about from a PR standpoint all season. The way this was handled, by the way, this report that came out on Wednesday that Botterill would be back, first reported by John Worrell. It pains me to give John credit because I'm not a big fan of John Worrell on a personal level. However, that ain't about this. John's a hell of a writer, man. A great reporter. I always give him credit for that much, at least. He broke the story. Very good job by him. He's the one who reported Botterill back for a fourth year per Kim Bagula's direct comment. So anyway, that's, how do I say it? That was bad enough, but it's not even so much that. But when you announce a decision that's surely going to be unpopular amongst fans, and then your team president / owner speaks kind of like condescendingly of fans in the process. Let me read Kim Bagula's quote to John Worrell from the AP, and this is a direct quote from Kim. She says in the AP article, "I realize maybe it's not popular with the fans, but we have to do the things that we feel are right," she said. "We have a little bit more information than maybe a fan does, some inner workings that we see positives in." What? Of course you have a little more information than the fan. Well, why say that? Why would you even say that? It's just ownership. They just don't get it, man. They don't get it at all. When it comes to the fans, they don't have their finger on the pulse of the fans whatsoever. I mean, that's never been more obvious. It's never been more obvious, right? Now, granted, and I've said this many times, I'm an overreactor. I'm a knee-jerk reactor. I tend to get a little nuts sometimes, but that statement, it almost feels to me like ownership is saying, screw you to the fans. You don't tell us what to do. We're the boss. Because it's got to be money. I mean, what? It ain't hockey. It ain't hockey. I can't think of a good hockey-related reason why Jason Botterill gets a fourth year. You tell me. I'm all ears, man. I mean, let's just recap the last couple of years. All right, let's just do that. Let's go down that road real quick here. The Ryan O'Reilly trade goes without saying, okay? They dumped him because he was not happy. Was it Phil Housley? Was it management? Was it the guys in the locker room? Whatever it was. Bottom line, the guy is one of the better centers in the entire NHL, talent-wise. Goes to the Blues, wins a cup. They get rid of him, and it's not that they got rid of him. It's not that they traded him. It's that they got freaking garbage in return. They got trash in return. That's ultimately what it was. Wes Tage Thompson becomes a hell of a player. Are you going to bet on that? I know I'm not. They got trash back, essentially. And now they're looking for a second-line center. It ain't Marcus Johansson, is it? You can't do that. Second-line centers, especially ones like Ryan O'Reilly, you don't sign them in free agency. You rarely, if ever, draft them. Come on. That alone should have got his ass fired. Let's just be real here. especially after last year. Then he gets a third year. Then he gets a fourth year now. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. You know, saying Ryan O'Reilly and dropping the mic, that would be short-sighted all the miserable flops and failures that this incompetent, bummy-ass general manager so far has done. How about this? They traded assets, a draft pick and a player, not for one, but for two players on this year's roster that as they were trying to make a playoff push in February going into March, healthy scratches sitting their asses in the press box next to the media. Paul Hamilton in the box. John Vogel in the box covering these games. Guess it wasn't far from them. Michael Frolik, Colin Miller, healthy-ass scratches. Guys that Jason Botterill gave up assets for can't even be on the roster of a team that's 24th in the NHL in the standings. My bad, 25th, because if they were 24th, they'd be in the freaking playoffs. That's 100% on Jason Botterill. Trade Scandella for a fourth. Dude gets flipped for a second. Oh. How about Jeff Skinner? You pay him $9 million. You kind of force into that. Guy comes, he scores 40 goals. You can't let him go. You get crucified in the media, crucified among the fans if you let a guy score 40 goals and then let him walk away for nothing in free agency. So I get it. You had to re-sign him. Skinner had all the leverage, and to his credit, he used it to his advantage. But you know what? You give this guy all this money, and Botterill, let's be fair here, you can't blame him for Skinner not playing with Eichel. That was a coach decision. So and essentially, I might be saying credit to Botterill for not forcing that issue. But you know what I'm not going to give him credit for? Trading Ryan O'Reilly. You want to break up Skinner and Eichel? You better have a good second-line center. Because guess what? A guy that you gave good money to, Marcus Johansson, in his 9 goals this year, that ain't it. That ain't it. More maddening to me personally than any of that stuff I've said so far is the last 2 years. This is a general manager that has sat around and did zero, nothing, zilch, nada. While this team went from best in the NHL to a complete train wreck. I'm not talking about this season, the season before. Let's remember now, this team was literally in November the best team in the NHL. Then they became a train wreck. They started drowning. They got in the deep end. They couldn't swim. Jason Botterill did nothing. This past season, which got wiped out, doesn't matter, the Sabres still not in the playoffs. But anyway, point being, they were good for a while. They were good for a while, weren't they? They had glimpses, which, by the way, I'm going to play a clip for a second. It pisses me off about Jason Botterill. He said it himself. But anyway, this team started good, got hot, gave themselves a chance, gave fans some hope. Then they went running the shitter again. And the general manager stood around with his head caught in headlights, did nothing. Nothing until the trade deadline. Nothing before that. Didn't stop the bleeding. Did nothing to stop the bleeding. You know what? I want to play a clip from Jason Botterill's presser on Wednesday morning about glimpses. Listen to this bullshit.
I think it's the younger players, the younger talent that we're bringing into the mix here. I also think that you can look at, we've shown it. We've shown the capabilities, whether it's the 10-game winning streak the year before. This year, what I was excited about was certainly a very good start, but we showed glimpses throughout, I thought, through the rest of the year. It was disappointing. We went through a tough stretch coming off of our trip to Sweden with a couple injuries and facing some good teams. I liked how we came back in December, playing against, I think it was Edmonton, St. Louis, Nashville, and Islanders that started December. I thought we played well there. And then even going into the trade deadline, I think we won 5 out of our 6 heading into there. So we looked at a situation where, hey, we're going to get Linus Ullmark back in March here, see how things progress. We understood that our schedule was going to be extremely difficult through March, but we were excited about playing those games and seeing where we can go. And I think that's where, this group has shown that for glimpses, we can be a very strong team. But it's imperative that we add more depth to that group and improve our young players to be legit NHL players to have success here moving forward. And that's why I would think that our fan base would be excited about the young players that we have coming in here and that we've shown that we can do it. Now it's imperative that we show that over 82 games.
That man talked about glimpses. Glimpses. Every team in the history of sports has glimpses. That is some weak, vanilla bullshit coming from a general manager of a professional hockey team. Glimpses. And this whole, the trade deadline, gearing up, this and that. Guess what? Meaningful games in March. I think they lost 6 in a row, 7 in a row, 7 out of 8, something like that. They were buried before. Glimpses. Those glimpses, in fairness, I will say this. Ullmark getting hurt definitely hurt the Sabres' chances. Hurt their chances of making the playoffs for sure. If the 12 teams in the conference instead of 8 or whatever it is would make the playoffs. Sure, if Ullmark doesn't get hurt, maybe the Sabres are the 12th seed in a 24 playoff. Congratulations. Let's throw a parade for Jason Botterill. Glimpses. That's a bunch of crap. And you know what? The young guy, this and that. I'm going to tell you right now, there's another thing too. The future ain't looking all that great either, okay? This is a team that's in pretty shitty shape when it comes to the salary cap. And there's not a ton in the near future pipeline either. I mean, they better pray that Dylan Cousins is even better than advertised. Because what else is coming through that pipeline in the next, say, 12 months or so that's going to turn it around in Jason Botterill's 4th year? Or is he going to get a 5th and then a 6th and then a 7th as they continue to finish in the mid-20s when it comes to the NHL standings? Just a bunch of bullshit. Because here's the truth. You look at this roster and you look at the pipeline, and at least over the next season or two, the best talent is already on this roster. Sans Dylan Cousins. Maybe Casey Middlestat if some kind of revolution happens and he completely changes, because we've obviously seen nothing at this point. I don't want to say the kid's a bust. Way too young for that. But we haven't seen anything to suggest that he's going to be even a good top 9 forward, let alone a top 6 forward. So you better hope that Dylan Cousins is even better, because there ain't a lot coming up this pipeline really soon. And this hockey team's not good. Not only are they not good, but again, they're in cap trouble too. Terrible cap management by Jason Botterill. Now, that's not all his fault. Some of these contracts are on Tim Murray. But you know what? You got 3 years to make trades. Look what Brandon Beane did for the Bills in 1 year, essentially, year and a half. So I don't want to hear that bullshit. You've had 3 years now as GM. Make your decisions. Find a way to get out of contracts. You should not be in the kind of cap shape that the Buffalo Sabres are in right now. But of all that stuff, everything I'm bitching and moaning about, here's the thing that pisses me off the most. I said I hate the Sabres right now. Here's why. The number one reason. You tanked for 2 years, and it was horrific. It was like a civil war among Buffalo Sabres fans. We all know the story. Anti-tank, pro-tank. Are we rooting for the Sabres to losing? What are we doing here? You can argue, and we're not going to do it today. Did the tank work? It depends on your perspective. Let's just say that. Don't want to get into that debate right now. But here's the one thing that came of it. No matter how you think the tank played out or if it worked or not, they got Jack Eichel. Here's the good news. He has been every bit as good as we could have ever realistically hoped for. He's a special talent. Guys like him do not come around very often. You can make a very strong case that he might be the most talented player in the 50-year history of this franchise. Now, not everyone's going to agree with that. And that's a very fair debate to have. But he's right up there. He's been every bit as good as we realistically could have hoped for. Maybe even better. He's certainly one of the top 10 best players in the NHL today. Maybe even top 5. So, as good as he's been, guess what? He is 5 years. He ain't even young anymore, man. Dude's played in the NHL for 5 years now. 5 years into his career, and the Sabres as an organization, and Jason Botterill specifically over these last 3 years, have completely and utterly rotted Jack Eichel's first 5 years away. Rotted it. If he plays at a high level, let's just say for another 5 years before he starts to slow down, you've wasted half the best years of his career already. Again, no immediate future, real hope in sight if we're being realistic here. You're looking at the cap. Do you expect Jason Botterill to pull off some amazing trades and make the Sabres contenders overnight? I sure as shit don't see it. I've seen nothing in 3 years that suggests that that's going to happen. So 5 years into one of the most talented, maybe the most talented players in the history of the franchise, who's been as good as expected, maybe even more, his career is freaking rotting away. Rotting away. Can you imagine how Jack Eichel must feel right now? Despite what he'll say, he's going to say the right things. He's going to show leadership and all that shit. But you know what? How could he not be miserable? I don't care how rich he is. I don't care how good he is. He's playing on a bummy-ass organization right now. That's what he's doing. It's the truth. Let's be real here. 5 years. How long do you think that's going to play for? I'm not saying he's going to get traded if shit don't change in a year. But you don't think that the wheels are going to be in motion for him to want to be out of Buffalo a year from now if things are like this? Again, the organization as a whole, the ownership, president, GM, rotting it away. And it's not his fault. There's not 1% of this that's on Jack Eichel. Not one. A lot's on Botterill. A lot. What about Rasmus Dahlin? You know what? By this time this team starts to do something, his entry-level contract will probably be up, and he'll make $1 gazillion. And Jason Botterill will still probably be the GM. Dahlin gets a big deal in 3 years, and the Sabres are 25th in the NHL, and Jason Botterill is entering his 6th or 7th year as Sabres GM. It's just a joke. Great players, generational talents are going to see their careers rotting away in this organization. It makes me sick. And I'll tell you what, speaking of making me sick, the relationship. When has, you know what, and this is an honest question here. It's not even like me striking out of anger. I'm asking a legitimately honest question here. When has the relationship between fans and a Buffalo professional sports team ever been worse than it is right now between fans and the Buffalo Sabres? It's a serious question. I'm being dead serious, man. I'm all ears. You tell me. Tweet at me. At Hammerman Tweets. Again, email the podcast, Talk Buffalo Podcast, gmail.com. I want to know. Let me know. Because I can't think of anything. This to me right now, in terms of relationship between how fans feel about this team and the ownership, the organization, the GM, it feels like it's at an all-time low. Now, I know Twitter only represents a small portion of Sabres fans. Facebook and those groups are only a small portion of Sabres fans. I know the fan base is much larger than just social media. But I'm telling you now, I've never heard a bigger consensus that hate this team, or maybe not the team. They certainly hate the organization right now, and I don't blame them. So again, you tell me, when has it ever been worse than it is right now? And, just imagine. I can't. It hurts to even think about it. Just imagine how lucky, in a sense, Terry and Kim are right now that they essentially lucked into Sean McDermott. Now, maybe luck's not the best word to use in that scenario because they did pursue him. It's not like he fell into their laps. They went out and they did pursue him. But Sean McDermott had a decision to make. I know Cleveland was in on him, and I think there might have been one or two other teams that he could have chosen from, and he took Buffalo. I know Cleveland for sure, and he chose Buffalo over Cleveland. Thank God. Because just imagine, and of course that led ultimately to Brandon Beane coming here too because of Sean McDermott and the Carolina ties. But just imagine if that didn't happen. If they didn't get Sean McDermott and they got a retread coach or another Rex Ryan or whoever the hell ever, and let's say that playoff draw continued, and you got the Bills of those 17 years combined with the ineptitude and unlikability of this shitty-ass Sabres organization right now, just imagine if the Bills were flatline and lifeless like the Sabres are right now. How miserable my hometown of Buffalo, the Buffalo sports fan, how miserable that town would be when it comes to sports. It's legitimately scary to even think about that. Because I know there's a lot of Bills fans out there who don't give a shit about the Sabres, and those guys are like, oh, Terry and Kim are fine. Well, the Bills have made the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. They're in good shape. So if you only care about the Bills and you don't give a shit about hockey, sure, you're in on the Pagulas. If you're a hockey fan first, or if you like both teams, it's like, eh. But just imagine if the Bills were like the Sabres right now, because they could be. They might be that way if Sean McDermott had not taken his job. Scary to think about. Last thing, too, that I want to get out here. I've seen this on Twitter a lot over the last couple of days because I've been going back and forth arguing with some people over this. Darcy Reguera comparisons to Jason Botterill, they make me sick. Now, look, yeah, Darcy Reguera stuck around for too long, overstayed his welcome. I don't discount that. I don't deny that. But, and also the suffering comment. I mean, that's going to haunt him forever, I'm sure. But look, here's the bottom line, man. Are you guys crazy with these comparisons? Are you nuts? Darcy Regier got the Sabres to the Final Four 4 times. 4. 2 Stanley Cups. Jason Botterill can't even get this team to have a game that matters on Shamrock Run weekend. Don't ever compare them. It's a joke. A joke. And by the way, that suffering comment that Darcy made, that'll be the most famous one. But this condescending quote from Kim Bagula to me, that's just as bad.